when we first came to Trenton?
Mm-hmm. You were a teenager then, right?
Yes, I was a teenager. And in that Coalport area, it was like a red district. Most of the blacks lived there.
And people coming from, you came from Georgia, right?
Right.
And most of the people who were coming up from the south, that's where they
Mostly came
to that area.
And we lived there, for about a couple of years, I guess.
Now,
Maybe not that long.
were there a lot of factories around in that time, in that area at that time?
Yes, there were many factories. As I said yesterday, you could walk out of a place today, a factory, this afternoon, you could get another one.
You get another job.
Another job.
There were that many factories.
Right, that many factories, that many jobs.
So maybe that was part of why people were coming up to that area, because they could get work?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's part of the Trenton make the world take. I mean, Trenton makes everything, and the world will take it all. My mother and my aunt, they was working, they had jobs. And then the 12th grade, I was a dropout. So I dropped out because I found a job myself, and I like having my own money. Because my mother, well, I guess you understand, mothers can only do so much. And I got a job and bought my clothes and, well, do everything a teenager would do, because then I was only about 16, 17 years old. So the job that I had found, a girl was working there with me, and she invited me to her house one evening. So I went over. Her brother was there, and I met him. And from that, we started courtship. I got married. So we had to move out of the village, Prospect Village.
And why did you have to move out?
Because I got married, and my husband's income had to go with our income to live there in the house. But then we found out that his income made it more than there was asking for. You could only live there with a certain amount of money that came into the house. So we moved. We found a place on Dunham Street. As I said before, that was the only place we could afford. We probably could have gone other places, but we didn't have enough money. So therefore, that was affordable to us. And Vicky came along, and we just continued to try and live there and fix up things.
Well, I can't tell you very much about why I moved here, because it must have been a surprise to me, because I didn't know my husband was looking for a home at the time. Really, I didn't until it was time to sign papers. Then I found out about the house I moved in now at 44 Dunham Street. I had no idea where we were moving at the time. He surprised me one day when he brought me to Dunham Street to show me. And then I found out they had a factory across the street, but I didn't know it was so bad until we moved in, and I couldn't even enjoy sitting on my porch because of the odor, the acid and whatever it is. It smelled, almost take your breath.
I remember it as a kid. You
It
would
make
make
you
cough.
It would make you cough, and
Just burn, like, it was a burning feeling that I remember.
And in the mornings when you got up, the trees out there, the leaves were big, so you could easily see. It was like a little frost on those leaves, and black dots, whatnot. And she said when she would wash his dungarees, it'd be holes all over.
The acid.
Mm-hmm.
That would be
Acid.
acid eating.
The community had made. And I remember another time too, something about there was smoke coming out of the, and maybe this is that red stuff that you all were talking about or heard about, coming out of the factory top. And they went and installed some kind of, it looked like an upside down J
Mm.
on the top of certain places on the top of that factory where this smoke was coming from. And again, maybe that was one of the efforts they were making to
Well,
respond
they
to
were
whatever
probably
the
doing that
community
to
was.
clean out the interior of the factory, and it was going into the neighborhood.
Oh, maybe that's what it was.
That's probably what they were doing.
I remember seeing those.
They were cleaning where the workers worked, but they were putting it out.
Pushing it
into-
out into the community. Could have been. And Julia, you lived on Reservoir Street,
On
right?
Reservoir.
Could you still smell it over
Oh,
there?
yes, yes. It was right over, angled like this way over. By Marion Street, across from
Oh,
Marion.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, it would make you cough. It was a very unhealthy situation.
Over there by D&L.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dr. Turner's store.
Matter
But
of
it
fact,
was just really a very unhealthy neighborhood situation.
I don't even see how the people that used to live on the street could take all that, you know, and maybe that's why they started moving out.
yeah. And well, we had tried to clean it up before, or either we went to the people direct,
To the factory.
yeah, and we wanted to know what was going on. They didn't seem to give us any answers.
That's pretty frustrating, obviously, for the community. They want to know what's been the impact on our kids. And, we bring the experts in, and the experts would say, we don't really know, right? I mean, there are some parts of the site where there were 30,000 parts per million of lead and cadmium and extraordinary levels that if kids were playing on that part of the site, because kids would go in there, they had a fence around it, but it was like a playground for them. They'd always have openings in the fence. And so those kinds of questions about what is the real impact of those toxins on kids was very hard to answer in the definitive. But this is endemic. This is like happening all the time in lots of places that are weak market cities where there's not a lot of developers and or public sector willing to come in and clean up these places. So we just basically pay for it by having, folks around these places dealing with situations that, are going to impact their health, going to impact their future. A couple things worth noting. The history of the site was that we call it the magic marker site because the last thing they manufactured there was magic marker pens. But the real contamination occurred back in the late 40s and 50s with Gould battery, Philco battery. Now Philco was bought out by Ford. Gould went bankrupt, and they had, in the manufacture of batteries, they were bringing in enormous amounts of lead and lead oxides.
Whenever we had the meetings, we went down the aisles, that's where we had some meetings too. And that's when I met
Marty.
Marty. Marty and his wife. Well, that was a meeting of Marty.
And he helped. He started helping.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And as I said before, we would go down the aisles too quite often.
What we got pretty good at is being able to test and remediate the soil in a way that makes it safe for community groups to grow food. And we have been growing that, pardon the pun, since 1981 to today. There's now 60 sites across the city, community and school gardens. In around 1993, we got a visit from James and Louise Rollings. These were leaders from Dunham Street who heard about our community gardens work and saw in their neighborhood some pretty interesting redevelopments that we were engaged in there. And they had an interest in being able to work on a little vacant piece of land there, but what they really had in mind when they came to us was not just growing food, but what they really had in mind was this 4-acre site that was right across the street from them. That was a vacant factory building that was contaminated, that was falling down, and they had been contending with that for 40+ years. And so they obviously had a sense that there could have been some problems with all of the background lead in their soil and their yards, as well as what was coming into the houses. And so it was out of that kind of history that this community persevered.
Well, we were looking for a name for the group, and that's what we came up on. NCIA, which is the Northwest, which we are the Northwest. Community, that was us. And association. So that was the Northwest
Improvement,
Community.
something about improvement, wasn't it? Community
NCIA.
Northwest
That's what we
Community
named the group.
Improvement Association.
And see, we also put flyers out in the neighborhood so that people who saw it could come to the meeting. So it wasn't like picking and choosing who you want to come, those that was interested in coming.
That's how you got people
That's how we
involved.
got people to
Right.
come.
Yeah.
Flyers was put, I remember we used to put flyers
Yeah,
out.
put out flyers all the time.
I guess like with any project, it's hard to keep people involved over a long period of
And this
time.
was a long time, this was a long
Interest.
period.
My years.
Mhm.
We started in '94 for, for everybody to meet the group. But Jim had been going down to the city hall. Oh, he was committee man, I guess about 27 or 30 years.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, it takes a long time to go from that factory that was over there to what's over there now. That's a lot of work and a lot of years.
They came in, they were oftentimes this first phase of African Americans into a mostly white community back in the late 40s and 50s. And they had enormous challenges from the environmental side alone, in addition to all the other challenges of the demographic shifts that were going on in the city. And they had an amazing stick-to-itiveness, an amazing maturity about these issues. The leadership did, James and Louise in particular, and their immediate allies within this civic association were willing to be in it for the long haul, which is what you really need at the local leadership level. And so we were grateful to have that kind of articulate, mature leadership that was willing to do what it takes and willing to disarm where necessary people who, whether state government officials, local government officials, there were no permanent allies, no permanent friends as we worked with the community group to organize.
Factory,
Acids.
and
Not only that factory, I mean all these factories, the wire factory, the rubber factory, they all had acids and leads and
and then
cadmiums and all this stuff.
we grew plants over there on the Magic Market ground, where the houses are now. We grew at least
A crop of mustards.
yeah, we grew mustard greens.
Why
and,
did you grow the greens? What did that do?
Supposed to have been taking the lid out.
Absorb the lid out of the earth.
Right, the mustard greens, and I believe it was sunflowers.
Mhm.
It was two or three things that they grew over there, trying to get rid of the contamination. We got the building torn down, and we got the new buildings up, and we got the street to come through.
And
Got
that
it.
street wider. It's wider. It's 10 feet
Yeah, they
wider.
made the street wider. We did a lot of work over there.
I can't remember too much, but
I think it's
remember how many
42.
houses over there.
I forget how many
Wasn't it
houses
42?
over there.
42 is sticking in
Is
my
it
mind.
42?
I think
Yeah, the
so.
2 houses on it, and then the rest
On
of
here,
them.
yeah, 40 over here and 2 over there. Yeah. The EPA guy told me one day when I was talking to him, when the first new house was, it wasn't complete, but it was up and the walls were closed in and people were allowed to go in and kind of look around. The EPA fellow there, who's federal, said this is only one of 3 sites in the United States, not just in New Jersey, but in the United States that went from a contaminated factory to clean enough so the houses could be built on it. Most of the time,
Yeah,
if they
I
could
remember
clean it,
it said that.
most of the time they could clean it well enough so they could put a slab down and they can put like another small factory or a place of business like that on it with no basement. But he said this is one of only 3 in the whole country that was clean to the degree that they can actually
Well,
have
they had to
homes
go
on it.
deep, deep, deep down to take that soil out of there. They took mountains of soil off of that ground over there. Mountains of soil. And I don't know how deep they went down, but then they had to bring all clean soil in.
We also were able to get attention paid to these sites for the first time because the state government, the city government didn't have this on their radar screen at the time. And so as this community group came together, got a better handle on what's going on there, we were able to bring the governor, who had a press conference, and she put together an initiative that was focused on these kinds of sites, not just around Trenton, but also in New Jersey. And that was a pretty exciting time. There's now all of a sudden attention being paid to this.
And so, but I got over, I stayed in, but now I enjoy my porch, and it sits out all the time now.
And see, it all comes from being knowledgeable about things and not just accept anything. And thank God, between your husband and you, he fought to the end.
He did.
He fought to the end because you can get too laid back in accepting things that you shouldn't have to.
That's true.
And
But a lot of times when you come from a condition that's really, really bad and you come to something that's a little bit better, I think the tendency is to say, oh, this is much better than it was before, and you don't think beyond that. I think that happens to a lot of people. In a lot of situations, not just this one.
yeah.
But I think in a lot of situations that may be part of,
So if you also remember New Jersey, North Jersey, that used to be a smoke zone. I mean, you go through there, you could hardly see.
Especially Newark.
Yeah, up in North area.
that was
I think
bad
they
up there.
cleaned it up a little bit now, haven't they?
I remember Pittsburgh being like,
Yeah.
I didn't know it was that
See,
bad.
all
up
of
that
these
way.
things has made a change. And
You know, when you're younger, you just get tired of hearing about it, I guess, in the beginning. But when I could see what was happening, I was really very proud of the fact that I had parents who were hanging in there when other people were just giving up and accepting the status quo for the best it could be. And they were people who had decided somewhere in their lives, before they got to Dunham Street, that there was more to be had, and that if other people had it, they were intending to have it too. And if they had to work to do that, then that was all right, because, you know, they did teach me that you don't really value things that people give you. You value what you work for, because you know what went into that, you know what it took to get to that place, and so you have more respect for it. And I could see the truth in that, being older and seeing what happens to people when you give them things that they don't have to pay for, whether that payment is money or time or whatever the payment is. If they don't work for it, they don't value it, and they won't keep it. Give a man a fish, teach a man to fish is a real thing. And I think what he had learned is that you find out quickly that most people know what they're talking about. if you really seriously question them, if you're trying to get to the bottom of a thing, then you really need to investigate what it's all about. You just shout out a question, so what does it mean? What's that connected to? Oh, that's another thing. You say, what's the connection? What's the connection? How's that related to what it is we're talking about? Or whatever it might be. He used to say that. A couple other things he used to say. You would know. What did he say?
I don't know, my mind is so messed up.
Oh, your mind is very good.
Oh, yes. We're very impressed. Yeah, you remember a lot.
I'm having trouble remembering what I have for breakfast some days, and she's telling me, well, 30 years ago on July, the blah, blah, blah.
I wish you could have met my husband.
He was a very forceful fellow. He loved to joke with people.
Yeah, he was something. Well, if you give up, you never win. You have to keep pushing.